15 years ago, I gave birth on Sukkot. So think about what that meant on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur 15 years ago. As hard as this high holidays has been physically, that was probably the most challenging high holidays ever. And as I was coming to writing my Rosh Hashanah sermon about creation, Yom Harat Olam, the birthday of the world, as we were always taught, Yom Harat Olam, I started studying that phrase and realized that Yom Harat Olam is not the birthday of the world. Yom Harat Olam is the conception, the pregnancy of the world. And so in celebrating the pregnancy of the world, the potential of coming into being of the world, I was thinking, why though? And it had always bugged me. Why? Why would God move from the bliss of unity into this, into the craziness that is our reality, capital R? Why would God become multiplicity and reality as we know it out of the bliss of unity? And as I was preparing for that Rosh Hashanah, it became clearer and clearer that being pregnant and the bliss of unity was wonderful. It was wonderful. But at some point, I realized there wasn't room in here for both of us. And also that really, I wouldn't be able to love this baby until it was other than me. I couldn't love this child until she was separate from me, until she was on the other side, till she was different, apart. That distance is where love happens, where relationship happens. It was going to be a terrible ordeal to get through to bring this child into the world. I remind her of it as frequently as possible. We were concerned about her health. We weren't sure everything was going to be okay with her. Nothing was definitive. And I had to have a planned C-section that was going to be complicated and frightening. My surgeon had a second surgeon scrub in, 4 units of blood hanging. It was terrifying. And I wanted to be awake for the birth of what I hoped was a healthy baby girl. And so it took all of the courage and all of the surrender I had to go into that procedure. And if you've been around here at all lately, you can see that she was indeed perfect. Perfect. This is how all of us come into the world. This is how every new being comes into the world. We come into this world through rupture, through breakage, through separation, through parting. That is how new life, new things happen in this world. Yom Harat Olam, the day of the pregnancy, the potential of the universe. And the universe that we have, the one that we inhabit, is not perfect. And that is why we have Yom Kippur. Because as gorgeous, as beautiful as it all is, each of us is precious and each of us is flawed. Creation has seams at the broken places. So we're here on Yom Kippur to acknowledge that we have places of weakness that give way, moments when tragedy shatters our world. We have experiences that break us away from an image of ourselves that we've held for a long time or an image of others in our lives. We experience ruptures in relationships that leave us feeling adrift. We are fragile and we fail. We fail our own ideals and values and feel shame at being less than we'd hoped. And always, we search for ways to hold the pain and uncertainty, to return to a sense that there's a possibility of repair. Eliana came to check on me as I was writing my sermons for the high holidays. She came to look over my shoulder to make sure I was working on my sermons. To be fair to her, I had been shoe shopping maybe once or twice. So she said, "So what are you going to talk about at the high holidays, Mom?" I said, "Well, recently in the last few years, I've really felt at Rosh Hashanah a need to talk about our world, the state of our country and our world, and what Judaism has to teach us at this time of year about that." She goes, "Okay." and Yom Kippur? I said, I don't know. I'm feeling really called again to kind of speak from a deeper experience of what I'm learning and what I'm holding based on my own recent experience. So I think I'm going to talk about my hip replacement surgery. And so she said, wow. So last year you talked about your mom and her stroke. This year you're talking about your hip. What are you going to talk about next year? She said, you're running out of issues, Mom, and there are words that have never been spoken before. Running out of obstacles, she said. But of course we're not, because we're human. We never run out of obstacles or material if we're paying attention. So after seeing a lot of different practitioners, because pain is not always direct in terms of knowing where it's coming from, I had no idea that my pain that I was in was coming from my hip. So I saw my chiropractor finally, and she sent me for x-rays. The radiologist said, yep, she needs to see a surgeon. So I went to see a surgeon, and the diagnosis was, as so many purebred German shepherds have, I have hip dysplasia. Me and Rin Tin Tin. So hip dysplasia was so bad on one side that it had worn through, and it was now bone on bone, and that was my pain as I was grinding bone against bone. A lifetime of dancing and playing basketball, hiking, and being active meant now that I would need a complete and total left hip replacement. I was devastated. I couldn't believe it. Judy was out of town, so Chaim showed up at the surgeon's office. So he was there as I became a puddle on the floor, not believing at 53 I was going to need some kind of massive surgery. But a lot of us, when we get scared like that and something's happening in our lives that we feel is out of our control, what do? We go online. We go online. So I found one of my ways of staying active and staying very clearly in my body with spirit joined to it is to be a yoga practitioner twice a week. And I looked at the website of someone who teaches yoga and is a paramedic, and at 42 had a hip replacement. So I thought, this is the person who can help get me through this. She says, I had witnessed the surgery, the hip replacement surgery, when intubating in the OR. So I knew that they would saw off the top of my leg bone, bore a hole in it to make way for a 7-inch metal spike, and then hammer a cup into my pelvis. Because the quadricep muscles are stretched quite to their limits for joint access, the post-surgery window requires nearly total rest so that the muscles can recover and regain their functional shape. This is what I read online. She said she rested and tried to go as far as she could. She finally got up to 5 blocks. She said for a full 3 months, no yoga asana, no weights, no craziness, no abandon. 2 miles were my max limit. And even swimming was forbidden until the scar had fully healed. I was a basket case and not a well-woven one. I understood what it meant to feel like a not-so-well-woven basket case, because we are a culture that celebrates independence and strength. And that, as crazy as it sounds, for many of us there's shame and a sense of failure in being diminished. In things like finding out my hip was deteriorating and had to be replaced with titanium parts. Why we feel shame? As grateful as I was that this technology existed, I was terrified about surgery, the aftermath, the pain, the recovery, and the rehabilitation it would take to get back my full strength and full function. And I totally, 100%, did not want it to be me on that table. This, of course, is the great theme of Yom Kippur. How do we hold our brokenness? How can we do it with great tenderness and honesty? How can we sit with the pain and try to get at what a new us might look like if we address the brokenness honestly, not with judgment, just with a real desire to become better people, healed people. Facing where we're broken where we're afraid, where we're heartbroken, is one of the hardest things we do. And that's why the rabbis in their great wisdom gave us this day. And they call us together to assemble because they know how hard it is for us to do on our own. Our communal confessions are supposed to take us to the places that are the hardest to get close to. Unatana Tokef and Baruch Hashanah that we just heard are to bring us close to our awareness that most of the important things in our life, most of the important things in our world are beyond our control. And that is supposed to urge us to change, to have a sense of urgency about change and about repair, to become different, better versions of ourselves. But just like with hip surgery, we can't affect the repairs unless we get at the broken places. So this is where I was this summer when I saw a TED Talk entitled, "The Person You Become." So I thought, I'll learn from a TED Talk. They're always very helpful. And the first story is a story of Janine Shepherd, who was born an athlete. She was a star athlete from the time she was a very young child. She was in track and field. She became a cross-country skier, and she had the highest oxygen intake capability of any skier in Australia. They called her Janine the Machine. The Olympics were her goal. She was trying to prove that Australia could be the best in the world in winter sports, and she was invited to train with the Canadian Olympic team. Her whole identity, she said, was her body and her training for the Olympics. She was on a bike ride with her teammates in the mountains west of Sydney on a crisp autumn day, as she describes it. They'd been on their bikes for 5.5 hours when they got to the hills, which was her favorite part of the ride, 10 minutes from the end of the ride. She said she could feel the cold air burning her lungs as she sucked in air. She looked up and saw the sun hitting her face, and then it all went black. Janine had been hit by a speeding utility truck. She'd broken her back in 6 places, 5 ribs on the left. She broke her arm, her collarbone, the bones in her feet. Her whole right side was open and filled with gravel. She had internal injuries and was bleeding so badly she lost 5 liters of blood, which is what someone her size can hold. She says by the time the helicopter arrived, her blood pressure was 40/0. Her body was how she had defined herself and how others saw her. She said, I'd always had control over every aspect of my life, and now I was lying paralyzed in an ICU, people telling me I wasn't going to walk again. My life, as I knew it, was over. I was 24. Listening to Janine's story, I was challenged into thinking differently about being damaged, being dependent, being limited, being in pain. From her struggle through unimaginable agony and a daunting recovery, after which they still didn't think she would ever walk, I was inspired to begin asking instead of how do I get through this? What growth or new me is trying to emerge through this breakage? Because of the help of so many people, surgery went well, and we were fed incredibly well for 3 weeks because people like Millie Wexler and Marcia DePaula spend their time making sure that people in our community are taken care of. Marcia heads up kin caring, and so whenever somebody has an issue or a challenge in their lives and they need tachlis support, actual hands-on kinds of support, Marcia and our kin caring volunteers like Sue Frank who brought dinner, they come over and they show up. Our community shows up. Had I not been broken, in pain, limited, damaged, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to be cared for by so many people in our community. I wouldn't have had the opportunity to hear from so many people, so many lovely, lovely things that they were generous and gracious enough to share with me. We just read, Utshuva, Utfila, Utzdaka, Ma'avirin et Roa HaGezerah. That we have a gezerah, there is a decree, we're human. Our genetics decree some of it. Our lifestyle decrees some of it. Fate, accident, tragedy decides some of it. But the fact is, there's a decree, a gezerah. But tshuva, tefillah, and tzedakah, those things, prayer, tshuva, repair, looking at our relationships, looking at ourselves and our relationship to our highest ideals, tzedakah, and acts of righteousness and generosity. Those things, ma'avirin et roah hagezerah, they don't annul the decree, which many prayer books say. It averts the evil decree. That is not the Hebrew. The Hebrew says what it cancels is the roah, the evil, the badness of the decree. That's what we can do for each other. That's what our tradition does for us. It gives us spiritual rehab. Tshuva, tefillah, tzedakah, those are some of the things that get us through. And I learned. I surrendered, and I learned from my experience. And so I'm going to share with you my recommendations from rehabilitation. I know we have a PT person out here, right? Yes, several. Gail's here. The partner of my physical therapist. They're in a wonderful business together. So all of you who are PT, you heard me on Rosh Hashanah, pain and torture. So spiritual rehabilitation, just like rehab, sucks. It's hard. It's really, really, really hard. So my lessons for you on this Jewish day of spiritual rehabilitation that I learned in rehab are as follows. 1, like any program designed to help us heal, it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, attention, and a lot of work. We're not going to wake up tomorrow immediately better people with repaired relationships. But we can wake up tomorrow ready to commit to doing the daily work that it will take to get there. Number 2, we have to pay attention to pain. When we ignore pain and try to push through it without addressing it, it will get out of hand and it is sure to get the better of us. When we ignore the pain and try to do more despite how much we're hurting, we lose the whole next day. We lose a glorious new day because we're too stubborn to attend to the message that pain is trying to send us. I was in a great deal of pain after surgery. But it wasn't all just the surgery. Some of it, the pain, the really bad pain, was from the fact that other muscles were having to compensate for the damaged ones that no longer worked immediately post-surgery. So my physical therapist told me that I should use a cane because if I didn't, I was going to permanently mess up those muscles or just keep messing them up. Then I'd be in pain, and then it was a setback, and that would interfere with my progress and my healing. So she said, I want you to use a cane. Whenever you're tired, whenever you're limping, you have to use the cane. So I learned how to do that. We have to use the cane. We have to use assistance whenever we're feeling weak. If we don't, we impede our own progress and we impede our healing. We have to rely on assistance when we're fatigued or weak. And how will we know that we're fatigued or weak? Somebody will say, you're limping. Number 4, people were incredibly nice to me when I was using a cane. Incredibly lovely to me. They held the door for me. They looked me in the eye and smiled. You know, people look away so you don't actually have to deal with each other. They looked me right in the eye, smiled and said good morning. They offered me their seats. Something about my being obviously injured or compromised made it safer for people to interact with me and brought out their shining, best, most generous selves. If we're not willing to expose our own fragility, our heartbreak, our fear, our grief, then we stop people from shining. And who are we to take people shining from them? We close openings that our own brokenness creates when we try and hide and cover it. Number 5 is that I had to learn to do the simplest things like walk all over again. I had assumed I knew how to walk. I'd been walking for 53 years. I'd walked so much I deteriorated my hip to the point of needing replacement. But it turns out when you're walking on a deteriorating hip, you're walking, but it's not normal walking. But you don't know that because you're walking. So I walked for my physical therapist, and she watched me, and she said, "You're not, in fact, walking. What you're doing is you're locking out on your left leg, and you're vaulting over your knee. You're not walking." Who knew I was locking out and vaulting? It took an expert to know that. And it took an expert to tell me what I was doing and how I could fix it. And slowly, and with a great deal of patience, I learned balance and swing so that I could walk again. When we let go of who we've been, when we grow and effect repairs in our lives, we will have to relearn to do the basics differently. We have to return to what Buddhism calls beginner's mind, as every spiritual tradition knows, if we truly wish to heal and do it differently. Number 6 is that good nutrition and hydration and rest are critical. They are not luxuries, they are necessities. Rest is not a luxury, it's a necessity if we're going to be whole, if we're going to be strong, if we're going to get better. So take Shabbat and vacation seriously. Take an afternoon to do nothing. As, again, the Buddhist tradition says, don't just sit there. Be something. Be, not do. Be a human being. It is critical for our health and function. And when I went to see Becky, my therapist, I said I had a new pain, and I didn't understand why I was getting new pains, different pains than I'd had before. And she said, well, it seems to me, watching me walk and what was going on and where I was hurting, she said, it seems that your scar tissue that you're laying down and that you're healing with, that's a good thing, but I think it's now adhering to your thigh muscle. And so you've got nerve involvement when you try to walk. I said, okay, well, what does that mean? What do we have to do? She said, well, we have to go in and break it up. You're gonna go in and break up the scar tissue that's adhering to my muscle. Yeah. So she took a tool, she pointed to the table, and she said, go lie down over there. And she said, this probably isn't gonna feel really good. And I, like an idiot, said, okay, and went over to the table, and that's exactly what she did. She used that tool to push right on where it hurt the worst. The most angry, red, hard, hurty, awful place, she dug right in. Because that's what it takes. If we don't push where it hurts, then it can become permanent. The hardening becomes permanent, and then it starts messing up absolutely everything else. This Yom Kippur, you're going to be hungry. You're going to be tired. Some of you are sleeping already. That's fine. It's good that you should sleep in shul instead of at home on Yom Kippur. It's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. That's what we do today. We push where it hurts. We make ourselves hurt. Because that is the only way to break up the places that have hardened, that are interrupting so many other healthy things and healthy functions. As Janine Shepherd said, you don't really know how strong you are until being strong is the only choice you have. She was sitting outside in her wheelchair, and she heard a plane go overhead. And she looked up, and she decided, if I can't walk, I'll fly. And she signed up for flight lessons in a full body cast. Her family got her to the plane, got her on the tarmac. They got her in the plane. The instructor realized she wouldn't be able to use the pedals because she was on body cast. And so he did the pedals, and he told her, you just pull up on the steering wheel. And so he worked the pedals. The plane starts to take off. She lifts, and the plane lifts into the air. And she says, now what? And he said, you see those mountains over there? Just fly towards those. And she said she realized in that moment that those were the Blue Mountains where she'd been hit by a speeding truck. So Janine decided to become a pilot. She became a pilot. She got her pilot's license. Then she got her commercial pilot's license. Then she became an aerobatics flight instructor, and then became the first woman director of the Civil Aviation Safety Authority. Her being hit by a truck, her being broken, her having to let go of who she'd understood herself and her life to be, could have been a story about the end of a brilliant athletic career. And instead, it was the beginning of a story of someone who was amazing at and loves to fly. Rupture is necessary for all new beginnings, for every new reality pushing into our lives. And so I've learned this summer to ask the question, what rupture is necessary for something new that's looking to emerge in my life? What will growth require of me and those who love me? At our staff meetings each week, we have an inspiration shared by someone on staff, and Matt, our executive director, shared a video by Sean Buranahiran, which you can look up on YouTube. This is the text. The photographs are unbelievably beautiful. And the text that he reads is, when a bowl is broken in Japan, it's put back together with the cracks being filled with gold, creating a beautiful lining. This is to emphasize the beauty of something that was once broken. They believe that when something has suffered damage and has a history, it makes it more beautiful. And the same goes for human beings. Everything that you've been through, that you're going through, doesn't make your life uglier, though it may seem like that when we're going through it. It's up to us to choose to paint our struggles with gold and make it beautiful. You are not broken beyond repair. You can pick yourself up and learn from what's happened and become a better person from it because of the struggle that you've been through. You can wear your scars proudly as a badge of honor, as if to say, look at what I've been through. It's made me who I am today, and I can get through anything that life puts in front of me now. Nobody has a perfect life, and nobody ever will. It's only up to us if we choose to paint our broken pieces gold and make it beautiful. Every next level of your life will demand a new you, and sometimes it takes being broken in order to become that new version of yourself. Janine Shepherd closes her talk saying that the way I connect to the world now is not through my body, it's through my heart. The takeaway for me is that life is about loosening our grip. We suffer when we hold on to things, and we hold on to things because we're unsure. I know it's in the letting go that we experience who we can be, and it is different. And it's still magnificent and incredible and fascinating and curious. It's just a different life. When you let go of who you are, you become who you might be. This Yom Kippur, may we learn to push on where it hurts, to paint the edges of our broken pieces gold, to accept help when it's offered, to let others shine by showing our own weakness, heartbreak, fear. Let us learn to listen to the pain and let it inform us. May we learn to rest deeply and regularly. And let us return to beginner's mind so that we can relearn the basics to become a new and better us. Shana Tova.